Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Welcome to Momentum. It is really awesome to have you tuning in wherever you may be. And that is around Australia or maybe around the world, wherever you're catching us on the podcast space as well. It's so great that you have found us and you've come to spend some time with us today. And we've got an awesome show lined up for you. And we don't always say that, but I suspect that this show is going to be really awesome and also really crucial for where we are currently at in life. Anyway, that's another story. Des, how are you, my friend? Are you good?
Yes, I'm really good. Looking forward to this show. It's going to be really interesting. You know, it's an interesting subject, and I'll let you introduce the subject in a minute. But while I've got control of the microphone, let me just talk about our website, momentumaustralia.org. You know, it's an amazing website. We've been really blessed with it, and so you can give us feedback. We'd love to get more feedback. But you can ask questions, you can listen to all our podcasts all on there. And if you want to support our ministry, please you do that by clicking the donate button on our website. And, you know, we're our ministry, we don't take any salary out of it. And so, you know, we really would love your support in that ministry. And also we've just started a YouTube channel. So it's Momentum for Men on YouTube, and you can access that out of our website as well. And we have a weekly show, the previous shows that we recorded the video, and so you can see them as well as hear them, which is scary for me. Not so much for Tim, he's a good looking guy, but for me it's all good.
Yeah.
Tim, how are you, my friend?
I'm really well. Actually, I am super excited about the show, but we'll get to that in a moment. But I just want to say, with regards to the YouTube, I mean, the truth is a lot of stuff is visual these days. And so we wanted to step into that space as Momentum and go, listening to us, that's one thing, but you can engage differently when you see something and see someone, and most importantly, our guest as well, which we'll get to in just a moment. But of course, just quickly, refreshing the Momentum care line number as well. And we got this number, I think, just over a year ago, Des.
Yeah.
It's 1-800-000-636. And we got that number specifically to go, if you don't have somebody in your world you can have a conversation with, or you have people, but you just don't think that this is a topic you want to share with them and you need a confidential space. Yes, there's Lifeline. Yes, there's Beyond Blue. And now you've got the Momentum care line as well, which is 1-800-000-636. And just urge you to make use of that. And a couple of the reasons for that, I mentioned in a show recently, we knew in that week of 2 suicides, one was a man in his 40s and one was a young man in 22 years of age. And Des and I have done the stats, and the stats around Australia are 2/3 of suicides every year are men. And that breaks our heart because men are choosing that over actually choosing to live and choosing to be part of their family. They think that's the best way out, and we want to absolutely refute that at Momentum and say there are other options. If you are listening right now and you're in that space, please do not suffer in silence. There are places you can go to, 1-800-000-636, and of course our website, momentumaustralia.org. Flick us an email and we'll see what we can do to help you out, connect you with some people who can help you in your circumstances. Please do not suffer alone in silence. One of the core messages from Momentum. Talking of which, the show that we're about to launch into is exactly this. We are told in the news and in social media that in Australia, we as a nation are suffering from a mental health crisis. And sadly, recent statistics would indicate that headline is absolutely true.
Yeah, some of the numbers are amazing. Like 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 7 young people have experienced mental health disorder in the last 12 months. 4.8 million, or 18% of the Australian population are having mental health related prescriptions in the last 12 months. That's just unbelievable. And as a nation, we have spent $12.2 billion on mental health services in the last 12 months. Many of us are struggling and will struggle with our mental health at some stage during our life.
One person who knows this well is Dave Quak. Dave is a pastor on the Gold Coast. He lives with bipolar. And earlier this year, Dave launched a podcast called Sunburnt Souls, sunburntsouls.com if you'd like more information. And essentially, the podcast helps people navigating the challenges of faith and mental illness.
So Dave joins us today on this week's Momentum. So Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so great to have you on the show, man. And again, you know, prefacing that by saying this is obviously a huge issue for Australia. And, you know, this is now you taking your own experience and speaking into that space. So we applaud you for doing that and encourage people to tune into sunburntsouls.com and have a listen to the podcast. But What do you think, Dave, is contributing when you look at those stats overall? What do you think is contributing to this wave of mental health issues that seem to be affecting so many, not just in our nation, but around the world, one would argue at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's two things going on. Like the first thing is that maybe it's always been there, but a little less to the surface.
Yeah.
It's always been prevalent, but we've just not spoken about it. Maybe in faith communities, we're a little more apt at not speaking about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one factor. And I also just think we're in just a crazy time in life where, it's economically difficult, it's spiritually oppressive, it's physically, demanding. Our young people are immersed in this kind of culture anchored in social media where there's just so much angst attached to it. I just reckon it's kind of like a perfect storm for this to be rising to the surface all at once. Post-COVID as well, lots of people discovered their mental ill health during COVID. So, yeah, I just think it's sort of like this perfect kind of horrible storm happening at the moment.
And if people listening to you right now and listening to the way you talk, you'd say, there's no way on this earth that this guy has got a mental illness. People don't take it. I think that's true across the board. People will have different issues going on inside them, but in terms of the interaction with the public, not often do you see it come to the fore because it's managed or whatever that looks like, isn't it? So we don't know what the real number is.
Yeah, it's so true. Like right now, I'm in a good headspace. With bipolar, you go up and down. And at the moment, I'm kind of like 70% up, which is kind of a sweet spot. You can hang with your friends, you can be energetic for the kids. But what I'm always weary about is there will be another point in the future where I nudge above healthy mania, get into that manic place where I start questioning my own thoughts, where I start thinking my loved ones are against me, where I start, misunderstanding a lot of different things, man. And it's tumultuous and it's really difficult, Des. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you manage that in a Christian context, if I can ask right up front?
Yeah, let's do that. A couple of things. So just as a personal believer, I wouldn't be able to do it without Jesus. Like I'm stuffed without him. I didn't get diagnosed till I was a little later in life, kind of till my mid-30s, which is late for a bipolar diagnosis. And up to that point, I just thought I was just weird, Des, like that I just had these rhythms that other people didn't have. But I just didn't understand. I had no framework for it, and so I just thought I was impulsive or annoying or obsessive. When you're manic, you'll go for months at a time on 4 hours sleep and then fall off the cliff into this depression. And then that's the first time you'll start going and get some help, because when you're manic, it can feel great. And so you don't quite know what's going on and then you crash. And so firstly, as a Christian, I need the help of God himself and my family and community. It's really quite humbling when you sort of come out and start telling your friends and your family and your loved ones, look, I've got this going on. I just actually need your help. And I don't need your help for a week or a month. I need your help for the next decade, and people to trek with you and not have the mindset. Like at church, as an example, someone breaks their foot and we get them a meal train and, 3 or 4 weeks later, they're taken care of. Whereas mentally ill crew are still going to be mentally ill most likely down the track. But it's just that long-term thing. I think that's just a bit harder to sustain. And then I guess the second part is, as a pastor, I mean, you don't meet many pastors with bipolar. And usually the risk is because, there's a bit of a correlation of people with bipolar losing grip with what is 100% real. And so when I'm in that place, I rely on my community. I rely on the leaders at our church. I rely on people that I love to be able to speak into my life and say, Dave, you're missing it here, or you're erratic there, or you're obsessive here. We need to pull things back. So, man, I need people. I need God and I need people.
Dave, can I ask what led to that diagnosis, or are you going to get tested for this? Because as you said, it was later in life and you just thought you were a bit weird and you kind of accepted that you were just a bit weird, but it was your normal. So what was the trickling point that went, actually, I think I might need to go and get checked?
Yeah, so for me, I was working myself stupid. I was pastoring on the Gold Coast and then also teaching at a Bible college in Brisbane. And what had happened is that I just thought I was busy as in committed, like a lot of people do when they're invested in their jobs. But what had actually happened is that I'd gotten into a place of mania where I was mania is kind of like you're erratically energized. Like you've had 10 coffees, like if you're a gym junkie, you've lifted the heaviest weight you've ever lifted. I mean, that's hypothetical. I wouldn't know what that feels like.
It's okay. Tim would. He'll
Tim's a lifter. He can lift, and then, but what happened is I stayed in that for way too long, and I just was like, this is not normal. And so I went to my GP, and he's awesome. And then he's like, look, there's way more to the story here. And so he referred me to a Christian psychologist where I chat some things through. But eventually I went to a psychiatrist and did a bunch of sessions with the psychiatrist. And he's like, dude, this is more than just elation. And then what ended up happening is that once that season kind of ended, I fell into a heap, like deep, dark depression for a really long time. Because it seems with me that the longer one pole lasts, the longer the other pole lasts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because I was manic for so long, I got depressed for so long, and I was in a hole, boys. Like I was stuffed.
So what did that look like in your world? When you say you were stuffed, but you had no energy, or what did it actually look like? You thought everything was wrong and everything was against you and those sort of feelings?
Yeah, it was like I went from being on cloud 9 to just being under a dark cloud. So kind of my rhythms for the day would be that I'd get up and instantly just be like, no, the alarm's going off. It wouldn't matter what time, because sleep was an escape from, the darkness. And so I'd wake up and it'd be like, oh, I've got to face the day. And I'd get up and I'd be like balancing a trinity of like, the Holy Spirit and caffeine and prayer, just be like, oh. And so I'd try to get through the day. And I was still an active pastor at that time. I'd finished the job in Brisbane. And so I was working 3 days a week as a pastor. I spread those 3 days over the whole week. And my goal was to get to 3:00 every day. And somehow I'd get there and I'd endure the meetings. And then by 3:00, I'd get home on a chair like this, chuck a man robe over myself, like a cuddly man robe over my head, and just be like in this sort of sensory deprivation place and just sit there as long as I could just to try to escape. And, and then my wife would get the kids and they'd come home and everything in me would want to just go and play with them and hang out with them and stuff. But I just couldn't. I was just knackered, and I could hear them laughing and I could hear my daughter interacting with my wife, and, they got lots of common interests, and I could picture my son sitting there by himself and with no capacity to go do anything about it.
Dave, tell us about, obviously that's impacting your wife and your family, but tell us about your friendships around that time as well. Because again, we just talked at the beginning of the show, and it is a common theme through Momentum of men, stay connected, get connected, and not just surface level, but talk about your stuff. So tell us about that for you when you're in that dark space. Is there even a capacity for you to have those sorts of relationships with other guys?
So one person who was very instrumental was my friend Brad. And so he and I had been in ministry together for a long time, so he knew me and he knew something was wrong. He didn't know quite what it was. But every Friday he would make me come to coffee and make me walk to the beach at Coolangatta. And I'd try to get out of it, and I'd try to call in sick, and he'd be like, nah, we need this. And when we're there, he's encouraging me, and because there's the spiritual side you need, but there's also physiological and biological. And so getting out, and so for him, for a year, every Friday just made me walk.
With that, we're going to take a short break and come back with this conversation with Dave Quak, Pastor Dave Quak. Sunburnt Souls is his podcast. Encourage you to have a look around that as we go to a break, sunburntsouls.com, and of course the Momentum website, momentumaustralia.org. We're going to come back and continue this conversation with Dave about mental health in just a moment. Stay tuned.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Okay, welcome back to part 2 of this week's show. It is Tim and Dave's with you for Momentum, and we've got a special guest, Pastor Dave Quak, with us talking about mental health and in particular exploring his journey with bipolar. And just before we launch into the second part of the show, gents, I had this as I was prepping for the show, and I just got this morning, and I want to share it because I think this is good for guys to hear. Admitting you have struggles doesn't make you a failure, it makes you human. And I think for guys, we can often think that admitting that we have struggles means that we're failing, not just as a human, but as a man. And I think the reality is we need to shift that and go, no, all humans, we're all human. We all have struggles. It's not just that men are bulletproof, and we need to get past that point. Admitting that you have struggles doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. I just wanted to start off by saying that.
Yeah, I mean, men have, over the decades, last 100 years or whatever, been in that position where, they came back from the war, they were supposed to be strong, they were, and it was really bad. My grandfather came back from the war and was a broken, devastated man. And, he became an alcoholic. He didn't talk about what was happening in his world, and nobody around him was equipped to help him through that. And I think that relates to mental illness as well.
I do want to just explore the church space a bit, Dave, because I too have been in certain churches, and I won't name them, where they have encouraged people to literally just go cold turkey off the meds, throw them in the bin, and believe that God's going to heal them, right? I've been in those sorts of churches too, and I think that's pretty dangerous. And you have a show on your podcast, which I thought was really interesting, and it's called Why Church Can Be Horrible for the Mentally Ill. I didn't get to listen to it, but explain to us why you think that is. Is it just that? Is it that we've got these radical ideas that, God's going to heal you, you can ditch your medication, or there's the extreme end of that where, no, all of this is part of God's plan. He's created doctors and people and given them insights and wisdom. And, is that why you say that church is a real challenge for the mentally ill?
Yeah, so in that podcast, I had 3 practical and 1 theological. The theological was exactly what you're talking about. So just some of the misconceptions and the misunderstandings we have about healing and how it works and everything. But some of the practical things, like even the very first one was, I've got so much feedback saying, I'm so glad someone's saying this. So, okay, your statistics at the start of this podcast said 18% of people are already on some sort of prescribed medication, right? So Beyond Blue speculates that by the end of this generation, 25% of people will have an anxiety disorder to the point of needing intervention medication or something, right? So 25%. So just imagine 25% of people in church with an anxiety kind of propensity or social, like a social condition or something. And then the MC gets up and goes, all right, everyone, would you stand to your feet and high five, the 5 people around you, or give someone a hug or have a bit of small talk, right? Now, if you're an extrovert, you're like, who cares? I'll say hello to some people. But if you are really anxious, or if you've got like OCD, or if you're like, man, I'm stepping into church for the first time and I'm freaking out, to do that to someone can be a horrible experience. And so I think sometimes we just don't think through some of the implications that influence 25% of the church.
That's really cool. I don't think we think about that in that sort of way. That's really cool.
And let's be honest, I don't know too many people that love the meet and greet moment.
No, that's right.
Honestly, I'm learned to cope with it. I'm fairly introverted, but I can cope with it, but I still don't look forward. I'm like, oh, here we go.
It feels fake or something, right?
Yeah.
And like, I get the implication that, the intention is that we want people to connect and build community and stuff. But even if you just phrased it and said, okay, if you're feeling outgoing and extroverted, say good day to someone next to you. But if you want to just sit down and have a pray or read your Bible, you feel free to do that too.
Yeah.
It still fosters the extroverts being able to say good day and have a hug or whatever, but doesn't wig out a quarter of the people.
Yeah.
Let's pull out a second then, and let me ask you this, Dave. Do you think that the church generically responds well to mental health? Do you think they're open to having those discussions, or is we've still got some work to do within the church world about this area of our lives?
I think it's both. I think some churches are like, okay, we really, like, if you'd have to be blind not to see that this is the biggest epidemic in our culture, is that mental illness is so pervasive. So I think a lot of churches are trying to get ahead of the game, but I think just maybe unintentionally, or even just that it's not thought through. I don't think we're there yet, Tim. I think we've got a long way to go. you know, and I love the church. I'm a pastor, man. I want the church to be good at this, but there is just so many, there's theological things and practical things and even pragmatic things that we do that I just think, man, we could just tweak that and do it a little better.
Yeah. I think, the fact that it's 25% of the people, like you say, who are in church have got this mental disorder of some description. And so I don't even think churches would be aware that 25% of their congregation have mental illness because they're Christians.
Yeah.
And so they don't have mental disorders, right? And so it's not a subject that's on their horizon. And it should be. Absolutely should be.
Absolutely it should be. And I mean, if church is supposed to be a place where we minister to people where they're at and they can come and find healing and restoration and wholeness, man, we got to be all over this.
It really kind of, again, breaks down the barriers of with respect. And when I say this, please hear my heart. We're not here to just rock up in our nice clothes and perform our way through church. The church should be full of messy, broken people. They love Jesus, but let's be honest, we've all got stuff to some degree. And it's going to look a little different for all of us to some degree. And that includes those that perhaps are struggling with a mental illness. And Dave, from your perspective, maybe change the tact of this conversation for a second, because, I mean, we're saying, we've said the figures, like it's huge. It is a huge deal. And as you're saying, it's going to increase in the next few years, 25% around Australia. How do people listening, and men particularly, right, let's go there, because we've had a couple of men on the show talk about their burnout, right? They've just burnt out. How do we know? Because let's be honest, we all say we're busy, right? Whenever you say to Edu, I'm busy, but I'm good or whatever, right? So we all use the term busy. I think we can all just say that we're all busy, but how do we know the difference between I'm tired from being busy versus I'm tired because something up here actually isn't quite right and I am on the brink of a burnout, or I'm not quite mentally stable, or something is not quite right? It's not just that I'm busy and tired. There's something else happening for me. How do we know that?
Yeah. As someone who's not a medical professional, all I know is anecdotally, for me, it seems to be when hope and purpose just disappears. And when hope runs out, we stop working with purpose and we stop trying. Like physically we'll give up because we're like, stuff it, it's too hard. Or, and because the hard thing with mental illness, and this is where I struggle, is there's some of it that is biological and very hard to control, right? Yes, absolutely. But there's also, as with every sickness and illness, responsibility of the person to do what they can to improve their lifestyle in any way they can. And so for me, it's about medication, but it's also about prayer and all the other things. And so I would say the defining benchmark where it becomes sort of like mentally ill is when you're done, like where you're like, your hope is gone and despair is kind of welcome.
Yeah. Wow.
Dave, as a final thought perhaps as well, let's speak to us as Christians and a church family, right? If we are in our church and we know somebody who has a mental health issue, or somebody comes into the church and they present with that, what is a really inclusive way of us interacting with that person? Like you said, to be sensitive to that, not that we're freaked out and we don't freak them out and make them feel like they're unwanted, but what's a healthy way of handling that?
Yeah, so there's the practical things like there's meet and greet and a few other things. But I also think every person is just yearning for connection, right? And so I honestly think people with mental illness need to be integrated and accepted in every area in church, the same as everybody else, and included and welcomed and championed. I mean, some of the most gifted people you'll meet have some sort of like mental illness,
Yeah. And especially when you're talking about 25% of the population, I mean, that's, you're going to get that mix through the congregation, aren't you?
Yeah. And look, given sometimes it's scary, like I was volunteering at our youth a few weeks ago and this guy came in and was having a really intense schizophrenic episode, like really intense. He wasn't with himself and it scared a couple of the female leaders. So they came and got me, and because I'm more kind of like trained in this, I was able to just take him to the side, chat with him, have a pray, driving home. It was fine. They would have been able to handle it if they had the equipping. So maybe it's also education, right? We've got or even triage. Like, okay, someone who's having a schizophrenic episode's probably out of the the realm of pastoral care for most people. But if there's only a few people in the church who can do it, that's sweet, And so just I think equipping the saints for all body ministry.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's funny, before you said that, my thought was exactly that. Maybe it's that we don't have the skills, the stuff to be able to, so we actually just back away and don't say anything. We kind of just ignore them, because it's not that we don't want to include them. We're just not sure how to handle it.
Yes. It's awkward, yeah.
And so I think it is that. I think it is perhaps having people in church that we go, okay, if this is going to be an ever-increasing issue, then we probably should be looking at equipping some people in the church to be able to deal with this sort of stuff, if and when it comes. It's been a great chat. Pastor Dave Quak has been our special guest on this week's Momentum. Check out his podcast, which talks about this, mental health, mental illness, and how do we balance that with faith. Sunburntsouls.com is Dave's podcast, and I guess it's just Sunburnt Souls if they Google, Spotify, Apple, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, podcast is Sunburnt Souls, so it's just on Spotify and everywhere. And then the website, sunburntsouls.com.
Yeah. Certainly check it out, because this is a really, really important topic and a really, really important conversation. And Dave, we really appreciate you sharing your story today and speaking into this space, man. I mean, it's, again, we all know that stuff is not wasted in the kingdom, and one would argue that this is your time to speak into the space, because you're living it out and getting those around you and being a voice and a light of reason in this space as well, mate. So it's been really great having you on Momentum, man. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. And to you guys as well. I think what you're doing is amazing. And I pray, you're at 45 stations at the moment. See that double in the next couple of years, because what you guys are saying is so necessary. So it's great to be on team together, guys.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.